Hello, everyone. Hope you're having a fantastic day. My name is Kmart, and I want to talk about some basketball. And today, we are going to be talking about the Houston Rockets, a team that so far in the 2023-2024 campaign has been making some pretty significant and surprisingly fast progress on a sort of kind of rebuild. Um, Maybe we won't call it a full rebuild, but a retooling, perhaps, for the team. So, long story short, the Rockets are doing better than maybe a lot of people thought that they would. Certainly better at this point in the season than I thought that they were going to be. And the idea here is that at least I believed the Rockets would improve this season, just didn't think it was going to be quite as fast as what we've seen right now. They're not an elite team by any means, but they're over 500. They're in the middle of the pack there in the Western Conference, and for the most part, they're sort of holding their own thanks to some strong play and a pretty impressive winning streak over the past week or so. So the Rockets don't suck. They are doing much better than people anticipated for this point in the season. The question is, why? And the answer, to massively oversimplify things, are really two main factors. A more overall sort of cohesive offensive approach and just a straight up elite defensive effort from the team. So we'll get into those two factors. We'll start on the defensive end because that's maybe the faster and easier thing to explain here. The Houston Rockets are one of the best defensive teams in the league so far this season, which sounds exceptionally insane to say out loud, considering last season they were the 29th best defense in the league, at least by defensive rating. So they were truly awful last season in terms of defense, and now all of a sudden they're sitting, in the top three. So we'll take a look at some of the stats for that Rockets defense overall. As I said, top three. They are third in defensive rating overall. They lead the league in terms of fewest points allowed per game. They have the lowest number of field goals allowed per game. They're fifth in field goal attempts allowed, and they're third in field goal percentage against. So they're not giving up too many opportunities. They are defending shots well. That is not just interior defense as well, that's extending out beyond the three-point line. They are just fifth in total three-pointers allowed and second in three-point percentage against. So in terms of the shooting, the Rockets are not giving up opportunities, and the opportunities that they are surrendering, a lot of the times those shots simply aren't going in. The Rockets are also first in the league in terms of assists allowed, which means they give up the fewest, so offenses against them are slowing down and being significantly less efficient than they would like. And just to throw in maybe a couple more stats here for the Rockets, they're 9th in steals, 11th in blocked shots, 5th in defensive rebounds. So, it's not just the shooting defense that's working out well for them. They are getting takeaways, they're forcing turnovers, and they are obviously grabbing rebounds off of the missed shots that they are forcing. So why is this working so well for the Rockets, whereas last season they were one of the worst teams in the league? And the answer lies mostly or heavily in the pace of play that the Rockets are going for here. A large part of their defensive strength comes from the Rockets' ability to slow down the pace of the game. The team's pace, as a stat, which is effectively the number of possessions you get per 48 minutes, give or take, but the pace for the Rockets is 96.5, which is the 28th fastest pace in the league, which means they have, just about the fewest possessions per game in the league. Now, that is a measure of the Rockets' offense, right? Pace is an offensive stat measuring your team's possessions. However, if the Rockets are only getting 96.5 possessions per game, you would, for the most part, assume that whatever team that they're playing against is also playing at a similar pace, right? It doesn't really make sense if the Rockets are getting 96.5 possessions per game that their opponents are getting significantly over the 100 mark or something of that nature. So it stands to reason that their opponents are being forced to play at that slower pace by extension, and that is where the defensive strength for the Rockets comes into play. When the pace of play slows down, the efficiency of a team becomes even more important. And as we saw from the numbers that I put up earlier, the Rockets have the third lowest field goal percentage against and the second lowest three-point percentage against. So a lot of teams in the league so far at the start of this season are getting by on volume over efficiency, right? Think, for example, teams like the Pacers. They just go up and down the court as often as they can. It works well for them. The Pacers especially lead the league in points. But when you play a team like the Rockets and you can't rely on that volume, when you can't rely on getting, 100, 110 plus possessions in a game to just keep on putting up shots, then it comes down to your shooting percentages, and that is somewhere that the Rockets have excelled at. So there's the strength. You've got a lot of young guys on that team that bought into a defensive scheme. You brought in guys like Dillon Brooks and Fred VanVleet, who maybe aren't always lockdown defenders, right? Brooks does have a little more of a reputation for his defensive prowess, but you brought in guys who could set an example, you got the young guys to buy in, and you have a defense that sits top 3 in the league as a result. So, the Rockets somehow go from 29th in the league in defensive rating to 3rd in the span of about a year. That is pretty damn impressive, but that's only sort of one part of the equation here for the Rockets. The defense is certainly helping them to win games, but there's that other half. The other factor I was talking about, the more sort of cohesive offensive approach for the Rockets, and that's the section that we need to sort of look at a little bit more in depth, because you'll notice now, twice I've referred to the Rockets offense as being more cohesive, right? A more cohesive approach offensively. I'm specifically avoiding using the phrase just better, right? More efficient, better offense for the Rockets, because the Rockets offense still really is not fantastic. If you take a look at some of the preliminary stats for them, we'll put those up on the screen right now. They're 18th in the league in offensive rating, slightly below average. They're 27th in the league in points. They're below average in both field goals made and field goals attempted per game, where they're 23rd in both of those categories. 20th in overall field goal percentage, 12th in the league in three-point percentage, so at least they're above average on that mark, and dead even. 15th in the league in assists. Just put one positive note on that. They're 3rd in the league in turnovers, so they take care of the ball if nothing else. But you take a look at those numbers, and the offense clearly is not sort of lighting up scoreboards, right? They're below average in most categories. So the scoring itself hasn't massively improved, but the offensive scheme and the offensive hierarchy certainly has. Last season, the Rockets were sort of running around with a setup in which anywhere between 5 to 8 different guys could be sort of the leading scorer on any given night, and not in a good way, right? Not in 2004 championship Pistons sort of way, and more like just no clear hierarchy. They were just going out there running up and down the court because they had young players, and they were trying to see which ones stood out from the others. This season, it seems that question has been answered. The question of who are the guys that the Rockets can rely upon has been answered. They've got their sort of 3 to 4 main guys here, and most importantly, they have significantly better or improved playmakers compared to what the offense was working with last season. Looking at a couple of the guys in particular here, I'll start with Alperen Şengün, who has very much emerged as an early sort of candidate for most improved player. I know we're not even a fourth of the way through the season, so that statement is a little iffy, but I think I'm going to stand by it at this point. Şengün has become really the sort of driving force for a lot of the Rockets offense. He's averaging 20.2 points per game, 9.1 rebounds, and a relatively absurd, especially for a sort of big man, 5.6 assists per game. He's also shooting well over 50% at 56.7. So he's scoring points, he's playing defense, he's grabbing rebounds, he's getting a pretty high assist count for a big man, and he's shooting the ball efficiently. He has taken a pretty clear leap from being a sort of up-and-coming guy like he was sort of last season to being, most of the time down the floor, the primary option on offense for the Rockets. So he has clearly established himself as one of the leading men for the Rockets offense. Another guy that we're going to look at here is Fred VanVleet. Obviously the sort of big free agent signing for the Rockets in the offseason. He is leading the team in assists with about 9 per game, give or take. Maybe that's shifted after the last game, but 9 assists per game. He's also putting in 16.6 points and 4.1 rebounds as well, which I know isn't going to blow people away, but Fred VanVleet is not exactly the biggest guy in the court, so the fact that he's getting in there amongst the trees and grabbing any rebounds at all is pretty good. He's shooting about 39% from the field, just shy of that, I believe, but the shooting efficiency is maybe not as high as someone like Şengün, but he's running the offense, right? 9 assists per game is the sort of big number to look at. Now, before we move on, I just want to slip one little bit in here for Fred VanVleet. He's playing extremely well. Is he worth the $40 million he's being paid, though? I would still argue no, not really. I think that counts as an overpay, and it probably always will, because that's an insane amount of money for Fred VanVleet. But even with that note aside, he is producing and helping this team and being an offensive leader for the team, rather than being sort of overpaid and not putting up the stats that the team needs. So I still say the Rockets are overpaying him, but at least they're overpaying for production rather than overpaying for nothing, if that makes any sense. But getting back on track there, those 9 assists for Fred VanVleet really is kind of the point here that I'm trying to get at. Assists were not a strong suit for Houston last season. They were dead last in the league in assists per game in the previous campaign. Their leading player in terms of assists per game was Kevin Porter Jr., and he averaged 5.7. So, yeah, now you've got Fred VanVleet out there getting 9 a game. Şengün is at, I think I said 5.6, which is about what Kevin Porter Jr. was averaging for them last season. So they've got 2 guys here averaging at or above the assist count of their leading assist maker last season. And you can kind of see where I'm going with this in terms of a more cohesive offense. When you have an actual true sort of point guard who, for the most part, knows what he's doing, running your offense, that assist count goes up, the scoring looks a little bit better, even if you're not scoring at a higher pace than you were before. You're getting better shots and overall have a smarter looking offense, right? The Rockets are still 15th in the league in assists, so, league average, right? But 15th in the league in assists compared to being 30th last season is a monumental improvement for, year over year. So the Rockets have found their stride offensively. Of course, the problem with establishing a hierarchy like this is that some of the guys who were in stronger positions over the last maybe 2 to 3 seasons lose their place. All right, there are some downsides for other players. Jalen Green has seen his scoring average drop slightly, really not by much. He was averaging about 22, 23 points last season. Now he's around 19-ish, right? So he is still getting his. He is still the second leading scorer for the team behind Şengün, but, taking a fewer shots per game. The bigger impact comes to guys like Jason Tate, can't pronounce that name correctly, and honestly, guys like Dylan Brooks, who just got brought in. They've been sort of relegated to smaller roles. They're not receiving as many shots as for Tate as he was last season, and for Brooks as he may have hoped for when he came over in free agency, but they're still being given their roles, right? They might be smaller, and in Brooks's case, it might be a little more defensively oriented, but they are still getting decent minutes. They're still getting opportunities. They're just not going to be in that top echelon where guys like Şengün and Green and Fred VanVleet are in terms of offensive priority. And frankly, that needs to happen, right? You would love to have a balanced attack on offense. You would love to have all 5 of your starters and maybe one guy off your bench capable of scoring you 20 points a night. That would be great. But at the end of the day, when it comes down to the way you run your offense, the priority is going to be given over to, 1 to 3 guys on every possession. The ball is going to gravitate towards your offensive leaders, and you need to know who those people are, right? And if you do know who those people are, right? Şengün, Fred VanVleet, Jalen Green, that doesn't mean that the ball can't go around to some of those other guys, right? Like Dylan Brooks, he's still averaging double digits in terms of points. He is not being completely shut out of the offense. It's just that if they need to go get a basket, right? If they say, hey, we need a bucket, we need to score here, we can't afford an empty possession, who do we go to? They now know the answer to that question, whereas last season it was just kind of, I don't know, whoever has the ball in their hands really gets to take the shot. So they look a lot better, even if the scoring isn't up. I will say as well, some of the reason why the scoring isn't up is because, as we mentioned in the defensive section, they have one of the slowest paces in the league. That works both ways, right? Defensively, it means your opponents get fewer shot opportunities, but it means the same thing for your own offense. And so they're not going to score as many points, but if they're efficient and the defense holds, that's still going to win them more games than they lose, which is where they stand right now. So, in my opinion, the focus for the Rockets here needs to remain on the defensive side of the ball, right? They're a little bit over 500. They're not one of the top teams in the league by any stretch, but the defensive effort really is going to be the basis that the whole team sort of has to play around here. Because of their team's elite defensive effort, they're winning games despite being at or below league average in most offensive categories, right? So to me, you need to maintain that effort on the defensive end and make, small incremental changes to get a little bit better at a time on the offensive end. If you go all in on trying to play at a faster pace, trying to be a better offense, and that results in a slip in your defensive play, then you've lost your advantage, right? If they surrender that pace, that slow pace that they're playing at, then you're just going to get run out of the building by teams like the Pacers, teams like the Mavericks, who just go up and down the floor and take more shots than you can deal with. So they need to remain elite defensively while trying to improve on the offensive end. They can't be complacent on offense, because we know what happens when a team has a top 5 defense but a truly terrible offense. The Chicago Bulls last season, sorry Bulls fans, you're going to catch a stray here, but they did the same thing. They had a top 5 defense but a truly terrible offense, and it didn't win them enough games to really be much of a team in terms of the postseason picture here. So the Rockets know what'll happen if they're complacent on that front. They still have room to improve really on both sides of the ball here, but I think the fact that they are where they're at right now after just an atrocious campaign last season is incredibly impressive. Can they maintain it over the course of a whole season? Not sure. I definitely don't think they're going back to the levels they were before, where they were one of the worst teams in the league. They're going to win more than the 22 games that they got last season, and we'll see where they go from there, right? But if you're a Rockets fan, you definitely have to be liking what you're seeing so far, and there should be hope for the future for this team and excitement for them right now, right? Because it's been a while since, well, I say a while, it's been a couple of years since the Rockets have sort of been in the competitive picture, and it looks like they might have found their way back with this overall game plan. So that's all I got. The Rockets do not suck. The Rockets are ahead of schedule based on what I sort of thought we would see from them back in the off season. So they are looking pretty good right now, but that's just sort of, my opinion on it. Please feel free to share your own. Do you think that the Rockets are legit right now? Do you think that they can maintain this effort or even improve upon it as the season goes on. One way or another, please feel free to share your thoughts. But other than that, thank you all so much for watching, and I will talk to you later.